Today we built fully functional Cyclops goggles. That's right, these guys can shoot optic blasts just like Scott Summers.
I'm sure, like many of you guys, that ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted laser vision. So without any further ado, let's get into how I made these things. First off, let's talk about the design. So I wanted these goggles to be as authentic as possible while also being functional. Cyclops has had many design iterations throughout the movies, TV shows, and comic books, so it was pretty hard to pick a look I wanted to replicate. I settled with the ones from the new X-Men '97 show because I felt it was the one with the most recognizable designs and because of how vibrant and clean the design just looked overall. So, after doing some research, I found a perfect design to use from the website DoD3. As you guys can see here, it's basically an exact replica from the TV show, and this will be perfect for what we need. Alright, now it's the fun part. The laser. So I did some research on lasers that you could buy online and just planned on reverse engineering the lasers to then fit inside of the goggles. However, one small issue. Yeah, we're cooked. However, I kept looking around and stumbled upon two very good options. The first option was to buy a miniature laser engraver, disassemble it, and take the laser from within, which would get the job done. Or I could disassemble a disk drive, take out the disk reader, take out the diode, use some engineering magic to modify it, and eventually get it to burn. Now, in typical engineering fashion, I would usually pick the second one. However, we are in a little bit of a time crunch for this project, so I went with the laser engraver option, and also a laser engraver is a pretty good purchase and it will help me for future projects. Alright, so now I have the technology to produce our desired outcome, which is to set things on fire. And then I have a shell to house said technology, which is basically just the goggles. All we need to do now is modify the 3D files we got from DoD3 to then fit the necessary hardware. So I used Mesh Mixer to sketch out the blueprints for the goggles and just to figure out how we're going to actually fit all the parts together. As you guys can see here is the hole for the laser to fit into. Now you may be wondering how we're actually going to activate the laser. Well, in almost all Cyclops media, we see him pressing the side of his goggles whenever he shoots out his optic blasts, at least for the most part. So I decided that for the actual mechanism, we were going to add a discrete limit switch so that whenever you press it, the optic blast will shoot out. And as you guys can see here is where the limit switch is going to slide into place. So the key here was to make sure that the goggles would be both comfortable and capable of housing the necessary technology. And when I say comfortable, I mean, as you guys can see here, just looking at this design, just for what it is, it looks pretty good. But I'm imagining it sitting on my head right now, and I just feel like it would be pushing into my nose a lot, and all the weight would be distributed onto my nose. And we don't really want that because it would just be too uncomfortable and leave marks all over my face. So I'm just planning on adding a discrete stretchy headband from one ear to the other, just so that it'll be a little subtle and it won't really stick out that much, and that way we'll alleviate some of the pressure from our nose. Next up was to build the main visor piece. So I decided to 3D print this thing on my FL Super Racer just so we could bang out this print pretty quickly. Again, going back to the comfortability issue, I decided to print this thing out of PLA just so it would be pretty light on my head. I set the infill at around 50 to 20%. That way it's still pretty strong. If we drop it, it won't break, but again, it'll be light and won't really put too much strain on my nose. Alright, so while these guys are printing, let's go solder together our parts for the laser. Okay, so as you guys can see here, we have our laser hooked up to an external battery pack, and we soldered a little limit switch inside in between the wires. Overall, a pretty simple circuit, nothing too crazy. I put some heat seals on the connections just to ensure the strongest hold, and that way the wires won't come undone over time. Alright, so as you guys can see, when I press the limit switch, a laser shoots out, and this is pretty perfect for what we need. Alright, all that's left to do now is to paint the 3D printed parts and then assemble everything together. Alright guys, so the print just came off the print bed, as you guys can see here. Now we're just really 2 steps away from completing the project. We just have to paint it, and then we have to assemble it. And painting it is my least favorite part.
12 seconds later.
Alright guys, so I just finished painting the visor piece. It looks pretty good. I also printed and painted the back visor piece, just so that it has a little bit more of a connection to my head and has something to grab onto. As you guys can see here, the ears just snap into place, and it's pretty good. It can swivel just a little bit up and down, not bad. This is just so that it has a little bit more something to grab onto and it can kind of stick to my face a little bit more. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the little headband stretchy material thing, I ordered this off Amazon. It came in a huge roll. I just cut it off, and it's just gonna go from one end of my ear to the other. As you guys can see, it's pretty discreet, and this is just gonna attach from one end to the other right here. So it's kind of like a little headband type thing, just that all the pressure's on my head as opposed to being on my nose. So let's attach this to the visor, and I'll see you in the next clip. Alright guys, so I'm just planning on gluing this stretch material into the visor piece. So let's get started. Thinking about doing about, as you guys can see, this is kind of the inside of it. I'm going to glue about in the middle is where the stretch material is going to sit. So let's glue that in there. Alright, then now let's do the other side. Alright, and then as you guys can see, this is pretty good. And this is for the headband. So guys, the visor's going pretty well so far, but right here in the center, it is pretty empty right now. And obviously in the movies, comics, and TV shows, Cyclops's visor has sort of like a red lens to them. And I kind of found a perfect material to kill two birds with one stone, where this comes into place. And this is basically a cover that you put on a case for a laser engraver. So this is a sort of UV protection for your eyes to make sure you don't burn them. So this acts perfectly as a protection for our eyes for the laser, and it also matches the color of Cyclops's visor. So this will be perfect. We're just going to cut it out and sort of put it in the visor like that, as you guys can see. But right now we just need to cut it to shape and then attach it to the visor.
Okay guys, so I just finished installing the visor piece in the front here. I'm really happy with how this turned out. As you guys can see, I also installed the laser in the front, so it looks perfect. All the wiring is on the inside, and here's a connector to the battery pack, and here is the limit switch that will activate the laser. So guys, all that's really left to do now is to test it.
Sure, I'm supposed to tell you guys to like not do this at home. Like, please don't, seriously. They could get dangerous. I'm a trained professional. But yeah, don't do it at home. Just please don't. For your own safety. All right, back to the video.
Wait, you think I didn't think of that? Of course I thought of that.
All right, all I have to do now is put these guys to the test. First off, balloons. Not bad, but I do think it needs a little bit more of an engineering flair. In other words, propane.
That's what I call engineering. It's little roast marshmallows on this. Oh shit. Oh. Alright, so I was serious about the don't try it at home part. Yep. Well, if you liked the video, subscribe, leave a like. While you're down there, why not leave a comment? And I will see you guys in the next video. Keep building.
Subscribe for more engineering content.